don't underestimate the value of finding something that might be underperforming for what you know the market can do based on underwriting the property appropriately, through the likes of, say, maybe the Odyssey community. Because if you can do that, you can find diamonds in the rough and they can bring in quite a bit of revenue.
Hi, I'm Wyatt.
And I'm Grace.
And you're listening to our dad and your host of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Moore, and we're back with my favorite type of episodes where I get to interview and talk and have conversations with short-term rental investors. And today we've got Mr. Ray Williams joining us. So Ray, thanks for joining, man.
Hey, Shawn, thanks for having me. It's always great to catch up.
Absolutely. That's why I love these conversations, because it is a way for us to just catch up and talk about the ups, the downs, and everything in between. And we let other people listen in. So, it's always a pleasure to have these conversations. And Ray, I was telling you kind of before, and those of you that listen regularly, kind of the outline of these, but I always love to start with the background, like what pays the bills, what got us ultimately interested in investing in real estate and then jumping into the short-term rental game. But let's start with the backstory of what pays the bills. What does that all look like? And, what's the backstory of Ray?
Yeah, the backstory is, byproduct of serving in the military, coming out of college after 9/11, literally the semester of 9/11 is when I graduated. Couldn't get a degree or job in my degree field of IT, ended up in the mortgage space. I've been here for 22 years or so now. And then naturally, of course, investing in real estate just kind of goes hand in hand with that.
Right.
From there, though, we stumbled into our first short-term rental. And as I've aged, I'm really enjoying the hospitality side of it now, of recognizing that we're involved in people's memories. Yeah. So that's really cool, really special. And so there's more of attraction for me to this asset class than long-term rentals or multifam or anything else, because of what it does for people's lives.
Right. Awesome. And so you've been exposed to the real estate game for a long time, with that long of a track record in the mortgage space. And so, you're not only exposed to it, you're probably seeing a lot of different asset classes. Are you primarily focused on single family on the lending side?
Lending side, yeah, single family, and then up to 4 units, of course, residential mortgages. So yes, We are on the residential side.
Yeah. Awesome. And so, so you've got some exposure there, and you said you kind of fell into that first short-term rental. How did that happen? Was it when you fall into it, did you buy it as an investment, or were you like, hey, listen, we're looking for kind of a vacation home for ourselves, our family, and we're looking for this asset, and maybe we'll rent it on the side to, cover some costs, or was it intentionally as an investment?
No, look, we were under contract on a duplex as an investment property, and the inspection, like they can do. We had a difference of opinion with the seller, and I felt it was a pretty major issue, could be waiting in the wings. They wanted to throw a little bit of money at us. We walked, and that's what pushed us into this first short-term rental. And when we contracted on it, we knew we were going to short-term rent it. In fact, I financed it as an investment property, even though you can technically finance those as second homes. But look, it was going to be on the market, the day of and after closings. And being a mortgage guy, I'm a little more conservative,
right?
And so we knew right away. In fact, my wife was pregnant with our daughter, who's going to be 10, and bless her soul, she would drive up the hill to set some things up, because at that time she was not working, and she's a warrior. So she kind of did that initial outfitting to get it the way we wanted it. And, we're going in blind. We didn't know what the hell we were really doing, getting a short-term rental off the market in 2014. But yeah, that was just kind of the plan. And really what gave us peace about moving forward, because you're talking about biting off a big nut, not knowing what the revenue will be, et cetera, was we looked at it as can we carry the cost? And if we have to, she could go back to work. So we were in a fairly fortunate situation, but there's still the risk, right? And there's still the mental, almost say tug of war, because I see this with clients where they go to buy that first rental, and psychologically our brains want to stay in the cave because outside there might be a tiger. Yeah. And so, what made us jump off the cliff was, I have a little bit more of a base jumper mentality than she does. And so I said, let's just do it. And we haven't looked back on that property since.
So that was 2014. So that was before we had met. It was before short-term rentals really became super popular. Like they were definitely gaining steam back then. You guys are outside of Denver. I don't think we cover where this property is. It's definitely in a Class A town, right? And location and proximity. And so you're in Breckenridge, right? And on this first
property,
one,
yeah, as I tell people, we're in Breckenridge, and we have what I would laughingly say is, the pinky ring, right? And Breckenridge, if I recall, was Summit County, Colorado, was one of the first submarkets to really get after regulation because of employing housing. And you got these ski towns, and it is a problem up there for employee housing. So yeah, we did have it before there was even really permit restrictions in Breckenridge. But one of the important things I think that matters, it's just because it matters to us, is being stewards of the community. Mm-hmm. So I used to tell the neighbors, hey, here's my cell phone number. Back in the day, before there was reporting numbers and such, just call me if there's issues. We never got phone calls. Never got phone calls, but I always told them, call me if the guests are giving you a challenge, because we want to make sure we understand one thing. That's your home. This is a rental house for us.
Right. And just knowing that you care, right? I always say we want to be good neighbors. We want to be good stewards of the community. And we want to be, rent responsibly in these areas. And the majority of owners, that's what they want, right? Like us as investors, that's what we want we want them to be treated like our own home. And so, and just reaching out to those neighbors, like you said, you weren't getting calls all the time. And we say that all the time. Talk to your neighbors, let them know, listen, we don't want parties in here. We don't want people coming in and, causing havoc. We want them to treat it like it's our own home as well. And if there's any issues, or if you're seeing any issues or something's bothering you, let us know so we can take care of it. Just that conversation buys you a lot of grace when you do end up having somebody that comes in and they're like, hey, listen, they were a little loud, but they quieted down or whatever. Right. And because we want that as well as investor owners, because the majority of investor owners are just people like us, right? They're just regular, average, everyday Americans that are building a portfolio, typically smaller portfolios, trying to do it responsibly, and love the areas that they're investing in and want to keep them safe and nice and the same as you would if you lived there, right? And I think that that's an important distinction to make. And you have, you were in Summit County, they got really restrictive over the last few years. In 2021, 2022, they really started getting, restrictive. And so I'm curious, because you had the ability to watch this, like when you got in, there was no really rules, restrictions, licensing, permitting. They weren't available. They didn't have them. Now you've had this property, you've had to see how Summit County has navigated this. And, I'm sure there were stressful times thinking, is this going to affect me, or some of these regulations going to affect us and our property? How did you go through that and handle that? And even though your neighbors were happy with you, as you watched a county that got very, very restrictive?
Yeah, I just stayed on top of it, as it was being talked about that Summit County was going to put, regulations in place. I made sure I stayed educated. What does this mean for us? What does it mean for the community? What are the positives and negatives for having short-term rentals? And, how can we make sure that we're, good members of the community and following the rules? Following the rules. I've had many conversations with the different departments, up there, just to make sure they know that, like, we're down here, right? But being 90 miles away or whatever it is from Denver, however, it matters to us, and we want to make sure that that home up there is being well taken care of, and that we care about the community up there. So yeah, that was the big thing for me, and it's just part of my core values. So it's just easy.
Yeah, it was just natural, right? It was second nature for you to do that. So staying on top of it is one thing. What about any involvement? Did you have to get involved to be able to when the permits and licenses did come available so that you could get one? Like, how did that process go? Or because like today, a lot of times it's really like people are always like, hey, listen, how do I, there's a lot of areas that are restricted, and it's easier for us to go in and underwrite and say, yes, we can, or no, we can't operate a short-term rental. And so we make decisions on areas that we're able to get licensing and permitting in, and making sure that that box is checked on the very front end of underwriting. But when you buy a property that wasn't available, and then as things mature and markets, the regulations start to pop up, staying on top of them is one thing. How did you make sure that you were able to actually get a permit, licensing, and stay within the rules and regulations as they started popping up?
No, I think Breckenridge did a great job. They had an organization, they had a plan. There was mapping about what areas it would apply to. Of course, they have since evolved it even more so to zones up there. And so for me, it was just important to know what we were working with, because as a former CPA told me about his story of building wealth, part of it's dumb luck. We just so happen to own the house we bought ends up in an area where we're able to rent it year round. But if we didn't buy that house, we would be, we're a byproduct of the regulations as they come. We would then have had to make a potentially a tough choice to stay in the market or exit the market at that time.
Right.
So going through that, though, was a great education because it helped us on our most recent acquisition to really know, now that regulations are in place, how do we navigate this to ensure when we close on the property, we're not going to have any problems, and what are the potential hurdles we're going to face getting up and running on this last property.
Yeah, and I think and we'll talk about that a little bit. And I think that one point I'd like to highlight is something that I talk about a lot, is making sure that we're buying quality assets in quality areas, right? Breckenridge is a Class A resort town. It's not going anywhere. It's a quality area. You're buying quality assets in that area. So and this is especially important. I think it's important always. The reason I say that is because those properties tend to appreciate better than, the average properties. And that's going to be naturally over time the biggest lever you're going to have, and the biggest leverage point you're going to have to build long-term wealth and net worth is that appreciation. It's not the cash flow on these properties, because of the quality assets that we buy. But the other like secondary point to doing that is, if you happen to buy in an area that doesn't have rules and regulations in place, and they do change, and you aren't able to operate as a short-term rental, and you have to make the tough choice of saying, hey, do we keep this asset or do we have to sell it now because we can't operate and cash flow as a short-term rental like we were hoping for? You still bought a quality asset in a quality area, and so you can sell it and put that money, that equity, to use somewhere else if you so choose, and it still ends up being a pretty decent investment for you. So, I'd love to hear your opinion on that, because if you had to make that choice to say, okay, hey, we can't get the licensing and permitting, we have to sell this property, because you bought, my guess, in a quality area with a quality asset, you would have been able to get out of it in a positive situation still.
Yeah, that town is nuts. Vail Resorts has come in there, and Breckenridge is just consistently named one of the best communities, ski resorts, mountain towns, etc. So, we kind of knew what we were getting into, but we're obviously very familiar with the area, being a native to Colorado, and knowing Breckenridge is different than Vail. Vail's very much more like a village. Breckenridge is a town.
Yeah.
People live there year round. And that was at a time where, we did see what was happening down here in Denver regarding real estate. But we beat the punch because a lot of people were starting to buy rentals in Denver. And as I exited that contract on that duplex in Denver, we were turned on to Breckenridge, hearing that somebody else had bought a short-term rental up there, and it just kind of clicked in, and it just made sense. I had spent a lot of time up there snowboarding with friends, and I just love that area as well. So yes, not that it's insulated in an area like that, and yes, that the real estate is more expensive, but you're very big on this, which is buy in a good area, but also buy in a place you want to go to, and it checked all the boxes.
Yeah. Yeah. And to me, that's the plan B. Your worst case scenario is if you have to liquidate an asset. If you have quality assets in quality areas, you're going to be able to liquidate with in the black, not in the red. Right. And so people always say, well, make sure you can, if you can't short-term rent it, I've heard people say, make sure it long-term rents. And most of the time these properties and quality assets and quality areas typically are tough to long-term rent because your acquisition cost is higher, right? And
Right.
so that's not the plan B. Is if I had to liquidate, did this property go up in value? And you can insulate your investment by buying those quality assets and quality areas. A little bit more expensive on the front end, but you're more insulated on the back end because those areas are established. People want to be there. Properties go up in value. And ultimately, if you don't have to sell it, great. You're building that net worth. But if you did have to sell it, you also can pull that equity out and put it somewhere else.
Yeah, it goes back to the old adage, right? Location, location, location. It applies. I think it applies in all asset classes in real estate.
Yeah, absolutely. It does, right? It's why do they say it? Like, I mean, it applies across the board. Warren Buffett, I didn't get that. That's who says buy quality assets in quality areas, and arguably the greatest investor of all time. And he says, I'm good because I buy quality, right? And I invest in quality. And so I think it's one of those overlooked things, because how many times, and you work with investors when you're writing loans for investors, how many times are they just looking at cash flow? And it's like, hey, listen, this is what I'm chasing, is a certain return on my investment as far as a cash on cash return. And my argument is always, over a period of time, a 5 or 10 year time horizon, the quality asset, quality area that's going to appreciate is going to make you a lot more money than that cash flow ever will.
Typically going to be the case. I have a personal experience right now where, it's a property I've owned for quite a while. And, we are looking to exit the asset. A great neighborhood, but on a second time in my life, younger me bought on a busy street.
Yeah.
So while it's appreciated on the back end, you're always going to take a hit. On the last exit, it was about a 10%, but we knew going in we were going to take a hit on the exit, and that's where, like with the short-term rental, I couldn't say enough that location matters, a lot. And so to just acquire, when my investors are just acquiring off numbers, numbers are great, return on investment, cash on cash, all this, but location matters. If it's going to be a short-term rental, underwriting the property, you're big on that. And I followed that process, on my last acquisition and built out my pro forma on it. And then sometimes you got to trust your gut, go with your intuition, and sometimes you jump off a cliff and base jump.
Yeah, I love it. And let's lead into that second acquisition. And I think you're saying, hey, sometimes you got to trust your gut and your intuition. That's kind of my version of, in the very beginning, when I tell people, buy in areas that you love, buy in areas that you would like, that you would like. And it's really hard sometimes for investor clients to really wrap their head around that. What I'm really trying to get them to do is, their intuition is typically going to lead them to quality areas and quality assets that have a draw, right? Your intuition is going, if you're like, hey, I love this property, I'd go use it. Your intuition is going to typically tell you that the market will like it as well. And so let's lead into that one. Like, cause like you even mentioned, like, hey, listen, I kind of run this last acquisition by the group and the community, and kind of got mixed reviews, because maybe not everybody saw that, they'd never been there. They didn't see the vision that you saw. And you were like, ultimately I trusted my gut. And then let's talk about the results of doing that.
Yeah, look, so it was an operating short-term rental. They were sitting at just over 50% occupancy, and their nightly rate, when I looked at it, I touched on this before with you about how I looked at it almost like a multifamily approach, which is, I felt it was underoccupied. I felt that the nightly rate was low. Property was magical. And so when I did my pro forma, and I did the 5-year pro forma, I plugged in what I think for what we could do with increasing the nightly rates, what we could do with plugging in the increase to occupancy. And at the same token, just like I did in Breckenridge, I went with a more conservative outcome from the underwrite to determine should we acquire, versus leaning on the actual numbers that are happening. It was, should we, if it's the lower numbers. And for me, I've always been conservative that way. And as a result, it worked out very well in Breckenridge. And so far on this one, it has worked out very well just in the first 90 days as well.
Tell me a little bit about that, where this one's at, and how that initial launch, those first 90 days have looked.
Yeah, so this one is outside of Idaho Springs. It actually faces St. Mary's Glacier. It's on a little alpine lake, and that's just what caught my eye. When I saw the listing for sale, I couldn't I didn't even know the lake existed, right? And I'm a native to Colorado. I didn't know about this little lake, but anytime you talk to someone about hiking St. Mary's Glacier, do you ever look down and see this alpine lake? Yes. Well, my cabin is on that lake. We have frontage on that lake. And so, again, they were at around a 53% occupancy rate. And we were blessed in that there were going to be bookings carrying over. The same token, we had to get the license, the permit transferred, and that goes back to understanding the regulations, because in this specific county, there is a proposal to eliminate the ability to transfer permits. I'm not sure if it passed now or not, but I knew I needed to get the property, because if that did go into effect, now you're on the waiting list.
Yeah.
And so that was all part of the underwriting process, was knowing the regulations. I printed them off. I read them. I was very familiar with what it was going to take. And, we were very on top of it with our submission to the county. And then since closing, so we're at 96 days, I think we're probably sitting in the upper 70s to 80-day range. October itself will have 2 days of vacancy on the property for this month.
Yeah, that's awesome. And congrats on the launch. And going back to this is like, and the mixed reviews are, one, it sounds like the proximity of the property is stunning, right? Alpine Lake, facing a glacier. I mean, you want a mountain property that's checking a lot of boxes proximity wise, which is why you were attracted to it, right? And not necessarily a well-known, like you're like, hey, I'm a native here. I didn't even know this existed, but when I saw it, it's beautiful. I love it. And we can start to see the potential in it because you started to understand the game a little bit better. You've been in it for a long time. You've kind of seen different things grow up, and you started to understand the underwriting. One of the big mistakes I think that a lot of new investors make is they're going to assume that past performance is going to indicate future performance, and it will if nothing changes, right? But you were able to say, hey, listen, I see all these things that I have, and I know that I can pull certain levers to help maximize this, help articulate it to the market, do these different things, raise the occupancy, raise the rates, which makes a big difference to the bottom line, correct?
Huge difference. And, in my underwriting, I did something that I'm not sure that a lot of people do, but I took the information from the reviews of the existing owner and fed them into ChatGPT to build a SWOT analysis of this property.
Smart.
And with that, I rewrote the listing to match that of the people who were the ideal clients to rent the property. And we rewrote the listing. Has that had an effect? I think there's no way to know, but it is a very different approach, stark difference to 10 years ago of getting that property up and running. This has been very different. And we're really digging into hospitality. I love the book Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara.
Love it too.
That restaurant group is phenomenal. What they did with 11 Madison Park. And we've really been taking elements into this property from his writings as it applies to the fact that there's just one central anchor for me going forward is we're helping people make memories. And if you remember that, you're helping people make memories. You may be renting out a home that they're staying at while they're on vacation, etc. Isn't it true that we could agree that that's going to be something they talk about years into the future? So for me, right, that's a big motivator. We've had 2 people recently stay there that were staying after a parent passed away.
Yep.
And so dropping flowers, once we learned that was happening, there was flowers upon arrival. And if we can help with late checkouts and things of that nature, because at the end of the day, we have the ability, even though there's a little bit of a clash of philosophies of the younger demo on how they feel about Airbnb versus hotels because of costs, owner demands, etc. And I look at it and say, short-term rental owners have something hotels never will, and that's the ability to be flexible and the ability to deliver a very high-level experience without a lot of effort. Being a human.
Totally agree. And in fact, just in our community yesterday, one of our members posted that that their property was part of an engagement, like that somebody just got engaged at their property, and they were able to be a part of that life. Those are major life events. We recently had at one of our properties, a parent passed away, and it was a gentleman who passed away. His wife and his kids. It was they had stayed all together at our property about a year ago, and it was one of his favorite places to go. And so they came back to kind of grieve and mourn and just kind of remember the times they had there. And she let us know that same thing. We had flowers there. We had different things that we delivered some different cookies and things, and just saying, hey, listen, we I can't imagine how hard that would be. We appreciate being a part of this. Anything we can do to make this better, let us know. And they'll be customers for life, right? Because of that customer experience and that custom experience, like you mentioned, it doesn't take that much. And we have that ability to do that. And we become part of these major, life events. And then ultimately, sometimes just small little events. I had one guy that stayed at our property. And he's like, man, I didn't know what to expect. Didn't think that this was going to be that big of a deal. We lived in Atlanta. Our property was in Cherry Log. This was this property there in Georgia. And he's like, we're just going to do a little 2 to 3 day vacation getaway for Christmas. We gave it to our kids. And he said it was our favorite vacation of the year, right? And and he said they went to Hawaii, they went to the Caribbean, they did all these big vacations. He said it was our favorite vacation, just going up in the mountains and hanging out together, and kind of, we don't have internet or anything there. So he's like, it was fun just to disconnect and enjoy each other. And when you hear those memories that you can be a part of, it's really, really fun. And then it's motivating to continue to do and raise the bar and do better and better. And like you said, it's just kind of being a human. But it's also it's a really rewarding part of it. Like, it's funny how when I talk to investors, I'm curious on your thoughts on this, but I kind of think I know the answer, is I feel like that is more rewarding than sometimes the money that we make on these properties. Like, it's like I hear more people talk about those types of things than the money that they're making on the properties. And it sounds kind of crazy because we do it as an investment, but there's a lot of reward and fulfillment from being just a part of that. And I think that's why a lot of us are attracted to this asset class.
I mean, making a difference, right? If your core values align with making a difference, then this is one way that by all means you can. You touched on the family coming up there to grieve the passing of the father, the engagement and these types of things that people experience in owning these short-term rentals. Look, I love a good hotel, but they're not going back to the hotel because dad said this was his favorite place, and they're not saying this was our favorite vacation. I've been to some phenomenal places in this world, and I'll be honest with you, the ones that stick out the most are either the ones that were like a B&B, ran by a husband and wife outside of Florence, or an Airbnb nearby the beach, things of this nature. And I love a good hotel, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to be the same experience when you have a host that's tuned in and is wired in and is seeking out the information to make your stay that much more elevated.
Yeah, and they're different. A lot of people will say, well, Airbnbs are going to take over, short-term rentals are going to take over hotels, or hotels are going to squash short-term rentals. It's a totally different experience, and there's a place for both. And so it's we're both in the hospitality game, but we're in the hospitality, like on the very boutique niche side of hospitality, and hotels are never going to be in the very boutique niche side of hospitality, right? It's going to be at scale. They're going to have beautiful properties, amazing amenities, but everybody's kind of got access to the same stuff. A B&B or a short-term rental is going to be, these little boutique niche properties with individual owners and managers that are really involved in that customized guest experience. And really, when you talk about unreasonable hospitality, it's one of my favorite books as well. And if those of you listening have not either listened to it or read it, I'm a big audiobook guy, so I listen to them all. I always say I read these books. I actually don't read any of them at this stage. I just listen to them all. But it's an amazing book to go listen to, and it's based around the restaurant business, but it's based around customer experience. And it's such an amazing book for anybody that wants to elevate the customer experience. And that's what we're really trying to do in our game. And it sounds like you're leaning all into that, which is no surprise that your properties are doing really well, because we're in the experience business. We're not in the property business.
Right. Yeah. And if you think about it, you touched on, hotels and short-term rentals serving a different purpose. One thing about a stay at a short-term rental, if you've stayed at them, we're travelers as well, right? It's more intimate. Why is it more intimate? Well, if we travel with our kiddos and stay at an Airbnb, we might be cooking dinner there that night, and as a result, then the kids are waking up, we might be making dinner. There just adds those layers of the experience overall. And if you stay at a hotel, Then you're going out, you're there less. They're extra space, of course, with the fact that, with two kids, if we go stay at a hotel, kids are getting to the age where if you want to stay up past their bedtime, you got to get a second room.
Yeah.
And there's just some really cool properties out there now, and you can really kind of find anything that you want to. And so, yeah, being able to level up the guest experience, it is just not complicated. That's why that book is so phenomenal, because you
Yeah.
can read the book and then say, well, how can I apply this to my short-term rental? And the ideas just start flowing, like water. But one of the things that we're doing is we're dropping a survey when people register or reserve. Is I'm dropping a survey to understand why they're coming, what's important to them, and also we're going to build a community around this particular property, which is if you could snap your fingers and something was there that would make your trip even better, what would that be? Well, that won't be for their stay, but in the future we'll be able to go back to them and say, hey, thank you everybody for your feedback. We added X to the property.
Yeah.
And then it gives the sense of for everybody that they were involved in also shaping the future of this property. So I'm really excited to kind of see what happens there. And yeah, we've already been on that particular property. We've already been approached by 5 people for micro weddings, for wanting to host a wedding at this location. So we'll see what comes of that in the future here.
It's awesome. And I love it. And that's why I love these conversations too. There's so many things that we continue to do to raise the bar that we, and even our intimate Vodacy community and our Vodacy family inside of our mastermind group, but also, beyond that, and just being able to have these types of conversations, share these types of things, even like using Chat GPT to do a SWOT analysis and really help us identify our target audience and how we're going to communicate with them online. I mean, and like you said, I don't know whether that made a difference or not. I'm sure it did, right? Part of one of the big levers we pull is how are we going to articulate to our target audience what we have to offer? And that, that's a tool that's awesome to be able to use. And just hearing something like that, somebody can listen to it and say, oh man, I didn't think of that. I could do that. Right. And it helps all of us continue to raise the bar, which is why I love these conversations and love having these, who knows what's going to come of them. I always say I learn more from every one of these conversations, just kind of catching up on everything than, and we're in this game all the time. And there's always something else we can be doing. And so it's fun to have these conversations. And I know we covered a couple of different things, kind of lessons learned today. And for me, the big takeaway was, when you said, hey, listen, we got mixed reviews. We found a property. It's been doing awesome, but it wasn't doing that awesome. It was kind of mediocre. If you ran the numbers before based on what they're selling it for, I might not have made a lot of money with this property, but you saw the potential because you've been in the game. You've been diligent about saying, hey, listen, I mean, it's obvious talking to you that you care about, operating as a top host, right? And delivering these great experiences. And so, but so you were able to see, hey, they're not probably doing it the same way I would do it, and recognize that opportunity there. You've been able to navigate, a property that you bought, 10 years ago now, right? And watch an industry kind of grow up a little bit, and then ultimately regulations change on you, having to navigate all of that. As we kind of wrap up the conversation, I always ask at the end, going back to your younger self, or like, you're ready to do property number 3. What are some of the lessons learned or piece of advice you would like to give yourself so that somebody else can kind of take that and, we kind of pass the baton and they can start to run from there?
Man, I would say, if you asked me, like, what would you tell a younger Ray? Well, obviously with Breckenridge, I would have said buy more. However, I would say to that younger Ray as well, read that book now and implement one thing out of that book, to elevate the client experience, because how you're going to create differentiation is going to be off of the client experience. And remember that when people are seeking to stay, they're looking to spend a lot of money with you. They're going to pay the OTAs a lot of fees. So going above and beyond, not treating it just as revenue, I think that can make a huge difference. And so I would say I would have handed myself that book early on, and I would have adapted even more, because where would it have led me to now? And where will this lead me to 10 years from now? And look, we're in the top 1% Breckenridge, and we're already showing in the top in Idaho Springs. And for me, I want to touch on one thing I didn't want to lose sight of, which is don't underestimate the value of finding something that might be underperforming for what you know the market can do based on underwriting the property appropriately, through the likes of, say, maybe the Vodacy community. Because if you can do that, you can find diamonds in the rough,
Yeah.
and they can bring in quite a bit of revenue. So don't underestimate taking the time to see. And also, I would say this from being in the mortgage game, when I have the clients that rely solely on AirDNA, I would tell them that you got to watch AirDNA's data because it is not always accurate. So you have to kind of go below the surface, maybe get that pro account for the time that you're going to buy the property.
Yeah.
But do the diligence, run the numbers, because if you can find the underperforming properties, you can increase occupancy. You can also increase nightly rate, and therefore you can find some really good deals out there.
Love it. I love that piece of advice, especially right now. It's super timely because there's a lot of people that feel like they missed the boat and you can't find good deals right now. And it's just absolutely not the case. You just have to go, you have to dig below the surface and be able to recognize what levers you can pull to get this property to maximum potential. And a lot of times, like you said, the underwriting is there. There's a lot of tools out there. You got to be able to know how to use the tools and extract the data that you need and be able to recognize the bad data that's in there, because every one of the tools has some data that you need to throw out. And being able to recognize these, I always say the best opportunities, they don't show up on the surface wrapped in a bow or as a present with a bow around them that says this is the best opportunity. Usually they don't look like good opportunities. It's up to us to be able to recognize them. And it's the reason why most people don't, is they don't take the time and to be able to educate themselves and get the knowledge to say, okay, yes, I know how to do this. And I know how to start recognizing those things, because like you said, there's diamonds in the rough in every market. And these conversations are so valuable. Those of you listening, I always say success leaves clues. We're having a conversation with somebody who's operating in the top 1% of one of the major markets in the US. And so there's a reason for it, right? And the other, the reason is because, like he's highlighting, and Ray's saying, hey, listen, go get that book. I wish I could have told my younger self to get that book, because he understands that's his way of differentiating from the market. By being able to have these customer experiences, these amazing customer experiences, and really raising and elevating the bar. That's how you differentiate yourself, right? And from the other 2 or 3 bedroom properties that you're competing against that all seem to have kind of the same thing, same location, same proximity, because every market's going to have that, right? A lot of people complain about the saturation of the market. I said, man, I love saturation. I love saturation because it is an indication of demand. That means there's a lot of people coming. And if I understand how to tap in and get my unfair share of that demand, it's a really fun game to play. And you do that. The number one reason and the number one thing that is going to help you do that is to elevate the customer experience. And that book will absolutely help give you some ideas on how to do that. And the things that we're talking about, because there's opportunities to do that in every single market. So awesome conversation, Ray. I really, really appreciate it. Anything that I missed, or anything you want to highlight before we wrap up?
No, I just, guys, I would say that, Shawn, I would just say thank you to you. Stumbling across to your community when I did, even being someone who's in the mortgage space, gained a lot of knowledge from the community. It's very interactive and engaging. So, because I'm a small business owner, I'm not on there as much as I would like to. Whenever I go, I see so much, willingness to share. The Vodacy community has been fantastic for me. I'll give you credit for why I do own that newest property, because I was ready mentally, and you guys had the tools for me. Someone who won't sit down and create the pro forma, but knows how to build one. And so thank you to you guys, because Vodacy has been instrumental in this most recent acquisition, and we have a plan going forward. Back to what I had mentioned before, on the next acquisition, absolutely going for properties that are being mismanaged, and bringing them up to the top of the market is the game for us.
Awesome, Ray. I appreciate you saying that. It always means a lot. That I always just appreciate people like you and our entire community letting me be a part of that journey. I learn so much every day from you guys as well. And you're right, our community is so willing to share and help everybody raise the bar. And you're doing the same by letting other people listen in on our conversation. So I appreciate you doing that today as well. Those of you listening, We know how valuable your time is, and we do very much appreciate you sharing it with us and spending it with us. We hope you got as much value out of it as I did, and having this conversation. And if you did, share the show. We don't run ads. I always ask you guys a couple favors at the end of every episode. We don't run any sponsorships or ads. So the only way this show ever grows is you guys sharing it. So if you know somebody else that wants to be a part of these conversations, our goal is to help somebody walk into this game with their eyes wide open and get nuggets of information that can help them raise the bar in the short-term rental game. If you know somebody else besides yourself that would like that, share the show. And if you have more than 30 seconds, like it, review it on whatever platform you're watching or listening on. Those things help us a lot. And the final, most important thing that I challenge you to do at the end of every episode is to pick that one thing you can do today to start building that life you don't want to take a vacation from. Cheers, my friends.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast. Share this with other people you think need to hear about it. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Hey Grace, is there a website? Yes! For more amazing content and expert advice, visit Vodacy.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.